We might kick off because we'll have people joining us, hopefully. Welcome to the people joining today. We've got a small and select group. I like to think of this session as a eat your greens. So those people who are joining us will be the healthy people because they'll be up to date. I'd like to welcome McEwin, who works at the AANA as their Director of Policy and Regulatory Affairs. Thank you so much for joining us today. So we're treating this session as a bit of a training session, education session, and hopefully questions from anyone in the audience. So please feel free to either drop questions into the Q&A box, or if you raise your hand when we go through the main bit of the presentation, Tiff, who is managing things in the background, will magically allow you to speak. So she will take care of that. So we'll let you speak. So a bit of background on why we're running this session and why we think it's incredibly important to, I guess, get up to date on something that's being updated quite recently, but also, I guess, the broader side of self-regulation, which many of our members may have a light understanding of, some may not have any, but we're hoping to, I guess, increase that knowledge and responsibility across all parts of the advertising chain. So hopefully many of you know that the AANA is sort of the home of the self-regulation codes that we have in market. So they're written and managed by the AANA, and then there's a complaints and governance system that runs through a group and a community panel. It's called AD Standards. So Megan today is going to give us a little bit of an overview of some of the upgrades to the Code of Ethics. And then we're going to spend the majority of the time looking at changes that are upcoming to the Food and Beverage Code. Can I hand over to you to share
Absolutely.
all the wonderful news and information?
Thanks, Gay. And if it's okay, I'm going to share the screen and share some slides. And I'll make sure I've got sound because we always like to do a few videos, so to keep you entertained. Okay. So I'll just pop it on the whole screen. Has that come through? Can everyone see? Can everyone see the whole screen there?
It's on presenter mode, but we can still.
I will. How's that?
Perfect.
Lovely, lovely. So I'm Megan McEwin, as Gay said. I'm the Director of Policy and Regulatory Affairs at the AANA, and my job is to work with our members as well as key stakeholders like the IAB to develop our self-reg system, so our codes, and which essentially are meant to reflect community standards. So we want advertising to be honest and align with community standards so that we continue to have a social license to operate. So how it works is the AANA, as we say, we develop the codes with our members and the wider industry, and we also do regular public reviews of the codes. We also have the complaints handling separate to us, so we don't mark our own homework as an industry. That is handled by AD Standards, and there is an independent community panel that considers all the complaints. There only needs to be one complaint to generate a case that goes before the community panel. So it's quite efficient in that compared to a lot of the government, the ACCC or even ACMA, if they've got regulation they need to enforce, often they have thresholds you have to cross before they'll take on a case. Whereas in our system, it only takes one ad and one complaint to generate a case for the community panel to hear. And then if you breach any of our codes and the community panel decide that an ad breaches a AANA code, then that ad either has to be edited to be compliant or it has to come down. So just going through our codes. So we've got 5 codes. We've got the Code of Ethics, which was updated in February, so which is why I'm going to go over that today. We have the Code for Advertising to Children. That's probably going to be reviewed next year. The Food and Beverages Code, we've just announced a new code that will take effect in November. So again, I'm going to go quickly through the major changes for that. And we've got the Environmental Claims Code. Really all you need to know is don't make green claims unless you've got substantiation for that. And the Wagering Code, that's about gambling. if you want any more information about that, contact us, because I won't be going through that today. So the definition of advertising in our codes is really wide. It's meant to cover anything which an advertiser has control over and is designed to promote or oppose a product. So it includes anything that actually criticises a competitor's product or puts a competitor's product down. What it doesn't cover is labels and packaging and station promos. So labels are actually already covered by the Food Standards Code, therapeutic goods codes around what you can and can't say on labels. We don't also cover that. But also in terms of station promos, so if Channel 10, for example, does an ad for an upcoming show in one of the ad breaks, that's not covered either, because that's covered by the broadcasting license conditions. So firstly, I just want to go through the key provisions of the Code of Ethics and what has changed recently. So this is a bit of a no-brainer. Ads shouldn't discriminate or vilify against a person or a section of the community on the basis of race, ethnicity, nationality, gender, age, sexual orientation, religion, disability, mental illness, political belief. So, you know, don't be racist, sexist, all the rest. But what happens is in many ads, no one goes out of their way to be racist or sexist. They just accidentally do it. It often happens on the editing floor, or they want to have a cross-section of people of colour in their advertising, but they don't have enough, and so they cast a person of colour in a particular role that then becomes quite inappropriate. So really the advice is have as many people of colour and as many wide cross-section of the community as you can in ads, and just careful when you edit. So I just want to give you an example of ads that went sort of wrong in the editing room. So here's the first longer version of this ad, and then we'll watch the shorter version. So let me know if you can't hear it.
Marty, can you hear me now? A bit? You're breaking up.
Some businesses have no business making your milk. New Devondale chilled milk, proudly owned by Aussie farmers.
Okay, so there's version 1, and now look at the edited version and try and pick what went wrong. Oh, sorry. Now, let's have a look if I can try again.
Some businesses have no business making your milk. New Devondale chilled milk, proudly owned by Aussie farmers. So
that edited smaller ad was found to vilify Asian businesses, which you're probably not surprised to hear. So I just want to, before I move on, mention that we've released further guidance on gender stereotypes. So we've now prohibited harmful gender stereotypes. So just be mindful when you are casting for ads. The dumb blonde or the Dorothy domestic stereotypes or the incompetent dad. They're the sort of ads that are probably going to be questionable under the new code. So sexual appeal, all you need to know about sexual appeal is don't use children in any way, shape or form in a way that is sexual. And if you're using adults, don't use sexual appeal in a way that it is exploitative or degrading. So some of the key things to think about is don't use a human as a product. So you focusing on body parts that aren't relevant to the product or service is now prohibited. So, for example, great example on this slide, using someone's breasts to advertise a trade plumbers, gas fitters software. So that is completely prohibited now under the current code. So just be careful if the product has nothing to do with a person's body. So, if, you know, for example, insurance, trades, motor parts, tires, you know, try not to use a woman in lingerie or a naked man, or, you know, we need to get a little bit more creative. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Violence. When we did the new code, we went out with Ipsos and did some community research, and Australians are quite opposed to violence being used in advertising, even where it's funny. So it's generally prohibited unless it's justifiable in the context of the product or service. So we're talking ads for domestic violence, they'll be fine. Ads, you know, if cruelty to animals, that where there's some sort of community purpose of the violence, that will be fine. But generally, violence is not okay in advertising. And this example here was an ad for a sleep clinic and it was a radio ad, and it had, you know, you being beaten and, you know, during the night, and it was basically about a man snoring and his wife having to beat him up, and basically it was domestic violence. So even though it was a comedy and it wasn't real domestic violence because it was a radio ad and they were obviously paid to read a script, it did not fit with community standards. Sex, sexuality and nudity. Again, with internet advertising, you've got a lot more targeted advertising you're able to do. This ad here is a Lush ad. It was seen in a shopping centre. We use that as an example, but essentially with sex, sexuality and nudity, you've got to just be careful of who's watching the ad. So again, internet advertising, you can target the audience. If you've got a website for lingerie, it's mainly adults going there, so you can be a bit more relaxed about what sort of advertising you run on your website. So essentially what's prohibited now is overtly sexual images on outdoor advertising and shop front windows where the image is not relevant to the product or service. So again, we're talking nude women on to sell tires. That's not on anymore. So just be careful, even with the internet advertising, if you're advertising on a certain show or a certain content that is seen by children, really be very careful with any use of sex, sexuality or nudity. Language, one thing that was really picked up in the review was that Australians are really relaxed about language. The F and the C word are really the only words that you have to be careful with, especially if it's Australian vernacular and it's relaxed and humorous. So there's an ad up Schitt's Creek they use, and so it sounds like up Schitt's Creek, but there's actually saying up Ships Creek, so that was found to be fine. Another one is boating, camping, fishing is BCFing fun. The F stands for fishing. So if you keep it lighthearted and funny, you can actually use swearing in advertising in Australia. Where children or there's some level of aggression involved, or it's the F or the C word, that's where you need to be careful. I just want to quickly show an example of that.
How long do you think this took me to cook? 1. Try 2 minutes because it's your foods and it's fresh. Unbelievable. I promise the best meals are your money back.
So there were 2 versions of that ad. There was the one where he didn't beep out and he said unforking believable. That was found even to just be too close to the word unfucking believable. So it was found in breach, but then they beeped it out and it was unbelievable. And so that was found to be even worse because you couldn't hear exactly what he was saying. It did sound like he was saying the word. So, and because it was a child saying it, it was deemed to be out of step with community standards and inappropriate for the audience and the media. Health and safety, I'll just go through this quickly. All you need to know really about health and safety is if you're going to do a serious ad with no humour or stunts or anything, you'd have to be really careful with health and safety. So if you're showing anything about driving a car or riding a bike or farmers doing things on their farms, make sure you are very compliant with health and safety. On the other hand, if you're going to do a stunt, make sure it's so theatrical and over the top that it's not being seen as something that's realistic or being condoned. So There was the Aldi ad where the lady's on the trolley. That was found to be so fantastical that it wasn't something that you would be expecting other people to copy. And then there was a KFC ad with Pluck a Duck riding at 1,000,000 miles an hour down this road on a skateboard. So that was also deemed to be completely fantastical. It was also done in conditions. They had a little disclaimer on the bottom saying it was done in under stunt conditions with a closed road. So those things where they're deemed to be quite fantastical and unrealistic, you're more likely to be able to get away with things. Where you're showing an everyday occurrence, then, you know, you do need to be really careful about what you're portraying in that ad. We also, as part of the health and safety rule, you're not meant to portray an unrealistic body image. So we had a decision on that recently, which is this picture here for Calvin Klein. That was deemed to be digitally altered, and a depiction that was irresponsible and promoted an unrealistic body image. So that is a sort of good guidepost of what is sort of seen as inappropriate and unhealthy. The other thing we've done in the new code is provide revised guidance for influencers. This is obviously very relevant to you. Anything that, anytime an influencer or an affiliate accepts payment of money or free products or services from a brand in exchange for them promoting that brand's products or services, the relationship must be clear, obvious, and upfront to the audience. So we're talking hashtag ad, advert, any of those banners that are provided by the social platforms, they're really good. What's not as good and maybe insufficient are things like hashtag, SP, spawn, gifted, collab, thanks to, or just mentioning the brand. So, you know, keep it upfront, clear, and obvious. This is a really good example of how to do it. Kylie Jenner, hashtag ad is the first thing you see. So moving on to the new Food and Bev Code, which we only announced 2 weeks ago, it is going to be taking effect on the 1st of November. So I just want to take you through the key changes. So all food and beverage ads from the 1st of November, all food and beverage ads must not be misleading or deceptive or likely to mislead or deceive. We're basically changing our code so that it aligns with the Australian consumer law, because most advertisers, if not all of them, have their internal compliance group do a check against the Australian consumer law. And so we want that to be meeting the code as well. All food and bev ads, they must not undermine the importance of healthy or active lifestyles or healthy balanced diets or encourage excess consumption. So here's an example here with Baker's Delight. School lunches, problem solved. That was found by the community panel to be giving the impression that that was an appropriate school lunchbox. And they looked at the canteen guidelines and found that in no way, shape or form would this be an appropriate lunchbox for a child. And it was found to be undermining a healthy, balanced diet. As well as those rules, all food and beverage ads, if they contain a health claim or a nutrition claim, they must be able to be supported by evidence. So Soul Press, an example, recent example, they had this an ad for this orange juice, and they said, have a flu-free winter season. That was found to not be substantiated by evidence. The next rule, claims relating to size, taste, content, nutrition, or health benefits must be specific to the promoted product. So the Alka Power water here, that made a claim on their website around made a claim that acidic foods like alcohol and sugary drinks would increase chances of sickness or cancer. Now, and then the flip of that is that alkaline products would help you avoid those illnesses. Now, it was found that drinking this product would not have that benefit. And so that claim and of the health benefit was not actually substantiated or wasn't actually relevant for the product that was being advertised. And the other thing is just not to portray food or drinks as a substitute for meals when they're not an appropriate food substitute. So we've also got under the new code special rules for children, because that's an area that the community always expresses concern around. So we define children as under 15 years. They are deemed to be children under the Australian Broadcasting Standards. So we've aligned with the Australian Broadcasting Standards that children are anyone under 15 years of age. So in relation to ads for occasional food or beverage products, those cannot target children. And I understand on the digital platforms, quite specific who you can and can't target. So, you know, we expect advertisers to take advantage of that ability to target and to not target children under 15 years of age. So anything that does not meet the Food Standards Australia Code nutrition profile test is deemed to be occasional. So essentially the FSANZ nutrient profile test is a calculator. It takes into account fat, sugar, all those things, but then it also takes into account nutrients. And if the nutrients are sufficient to balance that out, then the food will be deemed to be healthy. So if it doesn't meet that test, then it is occasional. So I've included a couple of examples of foods that would definitely be deemed to be occasional under that test. But things like cheese, milk, some pure fruit juices, tinned fruit, some cereals, Milo, yes, water obviously are all examples of products that come within the FSANZ test. So it is quite sensible, and there is still a lot of products from large advertisers that do come within the FSANZ test. The other rule around children is sponsorship. So sponsorship that targets children can't show the occasional food or beverage products. You can show a master brand, and we're very mindful that sport really relies on sponsorship to keep going, and part of the whole aim is to promote exercise and reduce obesity. So we don't want to do anything that reduces sport. So sponsorship is great. We appreciate that sponsors keep sport going. But when it comes to ads that in a place where children are targeted, like Little Athletics, those things, you just can't show the occasional food or beverage products, although you can show a master brand. The next rule is if you do a promotional offer. So these are things like the collectibles at the grocery stores, or other things, giveaways that you could have. So those sort of promotional offers of interest to children can't create a sense of urgency, like hurry, stop running out, or encourage an irresponsible consumption or purchase, which would lead to irresponsible overconsumption. So that involves example collection base, or buy 3 get 1 free, those sort of things. If they're of interest to children, they shouldn't be for occasional food, so they should only be for healthy food. And when it comes to awards, prizes or vouchers, you shouldn't be doing any occasional food or beverage product when it comes to those awards or prizes. You can do an award or prize for food that relates to the FSANZ, but not for anything that's occasional food or beverage product. So if you give away a voucher at a Little Athletics, just say it's worth $10, and it's redeemable somewhere, say 7-Eleven or McDonald's, KFC, it can only be redeemable for food that meets the FSANZ test. So I went through a lot. I'll stop sharing now, and I would really love to answer any questions you have.
That was great. Thank you. There'll be a lot of small soccer players and little athletes who will have to change their expectations of a slushie or a burrito or something at the end of that. So
yeah, that's right. So what we've been told is that often the Little Athletics approaches the store to give prizes and vouchers. So it's actually coming at the instigation of the Little Athletics. So advertisers just have to be mindful that this is happening. And I know McDonald's has little vouchers all set up that are done in a way that it's only redeemable for a specific product. So they need some sort of system, because it does happen where they proactively approach to sponsor or give away prizes. So just need to make sure if it is a voucher that it's only redeemable for the FSANZ style food.
I've got a few questions, but please, anyone in the audience, jump on as well. So I guess a lot of channels primarily deal with large advertisers, whereas in digital you've spoken to influencers, but I guess, I mean, more importantly for this audience, some of the smaller advertisers that may be buying direct, who may not be going through an agency who has any idea about any of this. What's the easiest way, if I'm a media owner, to push back in a lovely way to these advertisers? Is it to send them to the AANA site in terms of the codes, or what's the best way to manage?
Absolutely. So there's two things they really need to, if they're a food and beverage advertiser, they need to make sure if their products comply with FSANZ or not. So FSANZ, all that test does is determine if the food is healthy. So if you know your food that you're selling is healthy, you pretty much can advertise to anyone now. From the 1st of November, you're basically free to promote healthy food to children without restriction. And that was one of the benefits of the new code. Under the current code, you've also got to promote physical activity and healthy diet. And that a lot of people had unintentional breaches. You know, they're wanting to advertise something healthy like an apple, but they didn't show kids running around or eating a meal, healthy meal, and then they suddenly breach. So we want to reduce the red tape for advertising healthy food. So first off, get them to determine if they meet FSANZ. If they do, basically go to town. You don't have to target your advertising. If you don't meet the FSANZ test, you do have to be very careful how you target advertising. So they do need to become aware with the digital platforms when they're buying ads. Make sure they're very careful when they're ticking all the boxes about who they do and don't want to see the ad.
Okay. One of the questions has come through, which is sort of linked to something I was wondering if you could direct as well. I guess the idea of the audience. So firstly, whether that is just to the children themselves or if it is parents and their children. And then I guess secondary to that is how it's classed if it's a child audience. So apart from the targeting options, how is it determined, sort of what percentage of the audience are kids or not?
Yeah, so under the new code, you can rely on predicted audience data. If you've got reliable audience data, you can rely on that. So the threshold is 25%. So if you think that children are going to be more than 25% of the audience, you can't show occasional food or beverage product in that spot. So if you, on the other hand, if you've got a FSANZ product, you don't have to worry about it. You can show it anywhere. But let's assume it's occasional food. If you have 25% or more of that content, the audience is children, that's the threshold for crossing over, and you can't show occasional food or beverage products. If you don't have reliable audience data, then you'd have to look at other things like what is the content that they're watching? Is it sort of like C or P rated programs like cartoons, things that kids like with very basic visuals, cute characters? Then you're more likely to be seen to be targeting children. And even so, there are some certain shows, say on Catch Up TV, on digital platforms, that are actually becoming closer to that threshold now. So family shows like, say, Ninja Warrior, before they were sort of on the borderline, now they're probably more out of reach for occasional food and beverage advertising, because we've brought that down to 25%. But on the flip side is you can rely on the data. So if you see the data and it said the audience makeup would be only 10% children, and you place it in that spot relying on that data, and then the data finds out to be, on the night it actually ended up being 30% children, you'll still be okay, because you use the data to predict it. As long as that data is accurate, you're entitled to rely on it now.
Okay. And I guess from a responsibility point of view, at the end of the day, it's the advertiser who's responsible. Is that correct?
Correct. We get a lot of accidental breaches where advertisers have done everything they can to say, we don't want free spots, we don't want any of this, any bonus points. We really just want we want it on this show, we want it after a certain time, or we want it, not near any of this sort of content. And then one of the platforms or networks gives them a free spot because like, oh, look, you get this bonus spot, and it's during a program that's got a high child audience, and they get an accidental breach despite all their best efforts. So we really just make sure that advertisers really do make it really clear when they're placing ads on digital platforms, you know, ticking the right boxes, and just making sure that there's specific instructions or evidence that they did everything they could not to target children.
Okay. I think one of the areas that will be interesting for a lot of our members is not so much the influencer, but almost that affiliate area. And there could be almost some merging with commerce type promotion there as well. I'm presuming none of these rules, when you're talking about shop fronts in the earlier code of ethics, for these types of rules, does any of this impact in-store marketing?
Yes,
It
definitely.
well.
Point of sale and in-store is all covered by this code.
Okay.
So what you've got on your side with in-store is that it's not somewhere that you expect children to gather in a Coles or Woolworths or those sort of things. If it's a sort of store where children are gathering, then you would need to be careful. I'm trying to think of one.
Toy store, or I don't know.
Yeah, so a toy store. Yeah,
yeah.
So toy stores, you obviously need to be really careful how you advertise to children in that circumstance. If there's food and beverage advertising, don't advertise occasional food or beverages in that sort of surrounding. And then when it comes to influencers, the thing that we're having with influencers obviously is the disclosure that it's an ad. So just be really careful if you use an influencer and there's some sort of arrangement, whether it's for money or free products, that they do use that hashtag ad or something, or one of the paid partnership banners, or, you know, some sort of tool to make it obvious. But secondly, if they have a following of children in their content, so you can get certain TikTok stars who are really, really popular with young kids, probably don't use them for occasional food or beverage promotion. And we have, obviously, there's an issue like with alcohol or, you know, anything where, you know, it's not appropriate. I would start treating, when it comes to influencers, if you've got occasional food or beverage products, just stay away from any influencers that have a really high following of children.
Fantastic. So these all come in place on 1st of November. So presumably all the big food manufacturers across all of this, it will be sort of the outliers and the smaller areas.
And yeah, so that's why we're doing engagement with a lot of the creatives, you know, and we'll be working with the Ad Council to make sure that when people, if and when they ever go to a creative agency and ask for something to be done, then at least the creatives will know about our code. And the members of the AANA get free advice. So if there's any one of the IAB who are members, they're very welcome to come and run their creative ideas past us.
Awesome, thank you. Any other questions from anyone in the audience? I know Tiff's in the background managing things. Anything? Anyone with raised hands, Tiff? Or it's all straightforward. It'd be interesting to see this rolled out. Megan, we can help you. You know, if you got any questions around, you know, the many different digital environments that sort of are present and cropping up. So we'll love working with you, and hopefully we'll make this all successful. And I guess at the background of this, the importance of having a self-reg system is it means we can all operate in a more efficient way, make sure things are agile as our industry is, and not have to have everything go through, I guess, government regulation, that we can show responsibility and be grown-ups.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely, Gay. And I'm sure we'll be working with you closely leading up to this. Thank you so much for having me.
No worries. And anyone who's looking for those codes, they're all on the AANA website, which is aana.com.au. And thank you so much for your time.